All right, gentlemen, l'chaim. We're going to learn something very important tonight. Last time, we continued explaining the nature of Adam Kadmon, what's called the primordial man, which, if you recall, Adam Kadmon, also known as Akudim, the world where everything is bound, the bound world, you could translate, is the first step in the process of the creation of the 10 spheres. The 10 sphirot, the combinations of which create the individual natures of all particular creations in the physical world and in all spiritual worlds. Everything comes from the 10 spheres. The 10 spheres are what allow one God to create multiplicity, for there to be one creator creating a world of many things and many different types of things. It is all through the 10 spheres. And a single sphera, is made up of light and vessel. And as we know, as we've learned before, the light of the 10 spheres is one light. That's where the one infinite God has his influence on the spheres, because there's one light in spheres. And there's 10 vessels, and the 10 vessels are what make it different. So there's one light which comes from God and is, so to speak, infinite and undivided and indivisible. And then you have 10 vessels. The 10 vessels, like the famous metaphor of the colored vases, take the light and turn it into a different color for each one, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. They color the light, they give it a nature, they give it an individual nature that's one way as opposed to another way. This one is kindness, which is not severity. This one is severity, which is not kindness. And you have 10 spheres. And the question arises, okay, so you explain how a world of multiplicity can come from a God of infinite unity, but how is it that you have a multiplicity of spheres in the first place? The question is, okay, I understand where the world comes from. The world comes from the spheres, right? The world meaning to say everything in the world, all the particular creations, it all comes from the spheres. And the combinations of the spheres, right? A different way of saying, a different metaphor of saying that the world comes from spheres is that God creates everything with speech and words, right? It's the same idea. It's a metaphor from elsewhere in Chassidus, used in a different context, but it's the same gist, right? You have one person who speaks many different words, right? God says, let there be light, and there's light. He says, let there be a firmament, there's a firmament, right? There's 10 days of creation. There's 7 days of creation. There's 10 utterances of creation, which is not a coincidence, right? There's the different spheres, the different letters, which are then transposed and recombined, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, to create each and every individual creation. It's the same process we're discussing, right? It's basically the creation of each thing as it is, with its inherent nature from God, is created through the spheres and the recombining and the process of the inclusion of all the spheres, one in the other. And basically, through this process, there can be an infinite amount of detail, because you just keep going down the ladder, as we've been explaining, right? You have severity of kindness, right? You have kindness of severity of kindness. You have severity of kindness of severity of kindness, and it just keeps going down, right? And these different combinations are what give you the individual creations. Now, the question then arises, so where do the spheres themselves come from? We understand how the world of multiplicity comes from the spheres, more or less, or at least we get the gist. But where do the spheres themselves are multiplicitous? You all of a sudden have 10 different natures, 10 different vessels, right? 10 different, so to speak, translations or modes in which the light is expressed in the world of Atzilus. How does this come about? How can there be 10? So it turns out that this itself has a process, as we've been explaining. There's an order of worlds. There's also a certain process to create these, right? The difference is that this process is all before there are any worlds. This process is all within godliness, before there is any substantive existence outside of God with any definition at all. And nevertheless, there's still a process, right? The beginning of the process is called Adam Kadmon, or it's called Akudim, which is really our main interest here, but we described the rest briefly. We have Akudim, Nakudim, and Vrudim, right? Akudim, also known as Adam Kadmon, also known as Bria D'Chlalis, the general world of Bria, and Akudim, many other names. This is the world where there is an initial emanation, and in this initial emanation, from God's infinite expression of being, from Orein Sof. There's Orein Sof, which is an expression of all that God is, which is utterly unfathomable. Then there is a tzimtzum, in which that expression is hidden or taken away or removed, or it returns to its source, right? The tzimtzum is a whole other matter that we've touched on before. And once that light is removed, a single beam of it, whatever that means, a vector, a limited expression of it, is sent into the void, right? Is sent into the space that's left over, and this single ray, this single vector, the kav, creates the worlds. And there's a process of the kav. The whole point of the kav is that it's a line. It goes in one direction, which means there's a process. There's higher and lower. So the highest point on the kav that we're talking about is akudim. This is an expression of God where everything that is going to follow akudim is there, right? We described it last week as it's like your will to go to the baseball game, which includes within it all of the other wills for all of the other things that you desire for that process to be accomplished. So akudim, similarly, or Adam Kadmon, is God's desire for everything to exist, basically, and we spoke at great length about how this is everything that was, everything that is, everything that will be in any of the limited worlds, in all the physical universe, and all the spiritual realities. Everything is included within the world of Akudim, but it is included there, all bound together, all as one desire. God wants one thing, right? Just like going to the baseball game is one desire, but then that includes earning a living, and then you have to go and buy the tickets, and you have to drive to the field, right, and the whole thing. So to this, God has one desire, which is the world of Akudim, and the one desire includes within it everything that will come afterwards. And very briefly, we have, after Akudim, we have the world of Nekudim, also known as the world of Tehu, the world of points, where each one of the 10 spheres exists, but exists absolutely, and leaves no room for any of the other spheres, which is why it's very chaotic, right? There's no room for anything else to exist. Kindness is absolute kindness. There's no room for severity, which is why it's, so to speak, unsustainable. Kindness and severity cannot exist together there. They have no room for one another, no tolerance for one another, and therefore the world is destroyed. There's a breaking of the vessels, the Shviros HaKelim, and then what is born from that is the world of Tikkun, also called Vrudim, also called Atzilus, and this world is a world of balance, where everything is sustained, because all of the spheres exist as we know them, which is included within each one is all of the other ones, and they're all inter-included and interdependent. It's a world of order. Yeah, that's the very brief rundown of what we've been discussing. Today, we are starting after the 2 dots, which means there's a break in the mimer. It's the 4th line on page 350 in the English. And we are going to be getting back to our initial questions. And if you recall, this whole discussion of where all the worlds come from and all of this metaphysics has to do with a few fundamental questions. Really, we started out talking about time, but that's like 5 steps ago, right? We started off talking about time. That's the initial concern here. But after we began talking about time, we realized that there's really 2 things. There's time and the order of time, right? Because there appears in the Midrash seems to refer to God creating and destroying worlds and doing other things before the world was created, before the 6 days of creation, when time began. So there's a time, and then there's something preceding time that's like time but different. We didn't really get into it. We said we would explain it according to all of these other things we're going to explain. Then we said, in order to understand this, we have to understand what it says, that God looks in the Torah and creates the world, right? Which is, we read some wondrous statements about this in the Kabbalah, that literally the world is like the blueprint. The Torah does not create the world, but God reads from the Torah, and as He reads from the Torah, that is what He does. So the Torah, it actually says, the Torah says, let there be light. God reads it, let there be light in the Torah, right? And He says, and He pronounces, let there be light, and light is created. right? So the Torah is, so to speak, the source or the guidebook or the guiding factor behind the creation of the world, which led us to the next question, which is, isn't this sounds almost, God forbid, to say like idol worship, right? Because why does God need the Torah to create the world? On the contrary, the Torah itself is written by God. God is the author of the Torah. So what does it mean? What's the significance of God looks in the Torah and he creates the world? And really that's the question that we're attending to now, which in light of everything we've been discussing is very wonderful, because we can take all of this deep metaphysics and we can use it to actually understand something which seems perhaps more mundane in our day-to-day life, which is the Torah and God's given wisdom in the written and the oral Torah. And today we are actually going to explore the Torah at a very deep level according to the metaphysics we have been discussing. That's what we're going to do. Okay. Now we are on the fourth line of page 350. V'hinei mavur. It has been explained. Lamaila, above. The bechinas hiskalulus zu. This inclusive dimension. Hu bebechinas ezen chetem pe da'ak, is referring to the ear, nose, and mouth of Adam Kadmon. Now, let me remind you, we touched on this last week as well, that this level of akudim, which if you'll recall, is not a level in which there are any divisions. In fact, the entire emphasis is that there is no division there, right? Everything is one. It's God's single will for all of reality to be, and everything is included within that one will and that one desire and that one vision, right? Not each thing separately. Everything is there, everything is actual, but everything is unified. Nevertheless, in Kabbalah, it is referred to as having parts, which is interesting, right? It turns out that even something so unified and so singular as Adam Kadmon, as this level we're talking about, seems to have different aspects as well, which is very interesting. The last week we touched on the legs, what are called the legs of which it's obviously all metaphorical, right, in one way or another. We're talking about the legs of Adam Kadmon. The whole emphasis of the legs, it says in the Kabbalah that the legs extend to the lowest world. This is the last thing we learned last week. That the legs of Adam Kadmon extend even to the world of Asiya, even to the lowest of the spiritual worlds. What was the emphasis of that? The whole meaning of that statement, that it has legs. Obviously Adam Kadmon doesn't have legs. The whole point is that whatever. The whole point was that Adam Kadmon is not limited to one particular place or one particular dimension of being, right? We said Atzilus, for example, which is a much lower spiritual reality, it's already a world, it's already separate from God, that has a place on the map, right? Atzilus is defined as, here's Atzilus, and Atzilus reaches until a certain Tzimtzum, and then there's the world of Bria, there's the next world. Atzilus of the first world ends, the second world begins, right? That's the process. The process is like a chain, right? The first link reaches into the bottom one, and then the bottom one continues. There's no Atzilus ends, right? This is the four spiritual worlds we're talking about, right? As opposed to what we're talking about, as opposed to the topic of our concern, which is akudim, which is this very first expression before there is even a world. This expression of godliness is not limited to any particular level. It extends into everything. Why? Because if you recall, it's not really a defined thing. It has no unique identity of its own, really. It's simply God's desire for everything that comes after it. And since included in that desire is everything, even in the physical universe, right? So Adam Kadmon, in a sense, is everywhere. We're within Adam Kadmon. Right? There's no limit to that vision. In other words, when God had a vision to create the entire universe, physical, spiritual, all of time from the beginning to the end and with all of its details, that vision he had of the universe was all unified and everything was there. In other words, this class right now, us sitting here and having this discussion, was in Adam Kadmon. But not as it is in our world, but as part of a unity. It was part of his desire, his single unified desire. Everything was included in that vision, and therefore Adam Kadmon is really here as well. This is just an unfolding of Adam Kadmon, of the primordial man, of Akudim, of the initial world, the initial desire. Really, we're all just expressions of that, and therefore the legs extend even to the lowest world. That's what the metaphor is trying to say. So here we have a different metaphor, which we also touched on before, which is that this dimension, this aspect of Adam Kadmon, which includes all of existence, is really referred to as the ears, the nose, and the mouth of Adam Kadmon. And the emphasis, as I said, I think 2 weeks ago, the emphasis of this is that it's external. The emphasis is that everything has l'chaim. Everything in general. This is a really philosophical point, I believe. Everything has three aspects. There is the beginning of the thing. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But beginning and middle and end are not just technical or temporal markers that this happens to be before this, which is before this. Rather, qualitatively, philosophically, the beginning, the middle, and the end of something have inherent qualities. The beginning of the thing is how it relates to its source, how it relates to where it comes from, which is where everything finds its beginning, right? Everything finds its beginning if you're talking about a human being, or you're talking about a building, or you're talking about an idea or a concept, right? Everything has its beginning in a source. Right? Except for the source of all sources and the king of all kings. He does not have a beginning and a source. Everything, he's an exception. He's a special exception. Everything, except God, except things that have no source, has a source. God is defined as the thing that has no source, right? So, everything has a beginning. And the beginning of the thing is how it relates to its source. Then you have the middle of the thing. The middle of the thing is the thing itself, or the thing in relation to itself, if you want to be very fancy. Right? It's not relating to anything other than itself. It's relating to itself as it is. The thing in and of itself, the thing per se. Then you have the end of the thing. The end of the thing is how it relates to the next thing, how it gives way to whatever follows it, how it gives way to what it influences. Right? So it's not temporal, right? The end of the thing is not necessarily the end of its life, right? The end of the teacher, right? The beginning of the teacher is when he heard the lecture from his professor. The middle of the teacher is his own understanding. And the end of the teacher is when he teaches someone else, when he teaches his students, right? So you understand, it's not temporal, it's qualitatively we're speaking. In Hebrew, this is called Reish Teich Seif. The head, the inner part of it, and the end, and the end of it. The head, the inner part, and the end. Reish Teich Seif. So, Adam Kadmon is no exception. Adam Kadmon, despite how it contains everything that has ever been in a limited expression, Adam Kadmon is itself. It exists at a certain point, right? It's after the Tzimtzum, right? It's by no means God himself, which is the point that Tzemach Tzedek will explicitly make in a moment, because the implication in the Ramak, which we quoted earlier, is that it is God itself. And we follow the Arizal, which is that it's not. It's an expression, what we're describing here, which is what Tzemach Tzedek is going to say momentarily. So, Adam Kadmon, this level of Akudim, it also has a Reish, a Teich, and a Seif. It has a beginning as it relates to its source, it has the thing itself, and then it has how it relates to what comes after. And the point that Tzemach Tzedek is making here, when he says that this hiskalalus, this inclusion, this inclusive vision of all of the creation that God has, that we've been describing in the world of Akudim, where everything that is going to be is there, is really just the ozen chetem peh, is really just the external. It's really, in a sense, the seif of Adam Kadmon, or at least the teich. It's certainly not the beginning. It's more like the seif. It's an outward looking, because this is Adam Kadmon as we perceive it, as what will eventually be created from it. Right? In other words, to define, it's like defining. It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's like defining Einstein's genius by what he taught to his students. Right? The truth is that none of his students ever really understand Einstein's genius the way Einstein is unto himself. Right? Einstein is undoubtedly a greater genius than what he taught to his students, because you can't give everything of yourself as a rule. Right? You can try and give as much as possible, but as a rule, the way the thing is unto itself is to some extent inexpressible. You can't know it as it is unto itself. And all the more so, the people that Einstein admired and the people that Einstein felt were greater than him, all the more so we have a harder time relating to. Right? It's just a metaphor. So it's a similar idea here. That all of the worlds and all of the universes and everything that comes after is included in the vision of Adam Kadmon, in this single desire that's in Akudim, that's all talking about it from the perspective of what comes after. In other words, this is an external, in a sense, an external way of looking at Adam Kadmon, right? This is, in a sense, the outside. This is what's going to come after, right? And the Tzemach Tzedek is going to say, but it's not really the thing itself, as we're going to see here. So this is only the nose, the ears, the nose, and the mouth of Adam Kadmon, shem kelim chitzonim shebay, which are the external vessels within it, right? Not external to Adam Kadmon, God forbid. He's saying that to even look at it in terms of what comes from it is to look at an external aspect of it. That's what he's saying. It's a little bit on the subtle side. Masha'en kein primiyusay, as opposed to the inner aspect, the thing itself, the teich of Adam Kadmon. This is the ray, the vector from Ein Sof. In other words, you can define. It's like It's like we here in the community define Rabbi Silverman as very great, and he's a great rabbi here when he's in the community. But by Rabbi Silverman's terms, he felt that he was greatest when he was sitting and learning from the Rebbe. Right? It's another metaphor. In other words, even though he has great accomplishments unto his own name, right? When was he at his highest point? Was when he was not running on his own steam, when he was not self-defined, but rather when he was receiving from his source. Right? Another metaphor. So it's a similar idea here. Adam Kadmon, in its inner definition, in other words, its inner life, receives from the vector, receives from the kav, the ray from Or Ein Sof after the tzimtzum. So really, if you ask, what is Adam Kadmon, everything that comes after Adam Kadmon will say, what's Adam Kadmon? It's the source. We were all there. We were all included in its vision. But if you ask Adam Kadmon itself, so to speak, how do you self-define? Its self-definition it's in relation to the kav, not in relation to anything that comes after. It would say, I receive and am created by the vector of light that comes from after the tzimtzum. Right? This is a type of thinking you see often in Chassidus when you discuss. Yes, every other discussion of Seder Shtalshalos or the order of the worlds, all these metaphysical notions. So Adam Kadmon is really self-defined, not in what it gives, but what it receives. It receives from this very lofty place, from the kav, which is a pure expression of godliness, right? Totally undefined, not defined in terms of what comes after. Hapashit betachlis, it is absolutely simple, which is another way of saying it's undefined. The better way, which undefined is a different way of saying. The einai be'erech afil liyes nikra or klali, and it is incommensurate to even call it the general light of the world. By Ak's self-definition, by what Adam Kadmon or Akudim, this level, what we have been describing as the vision of everything that comes after, the way it is self-defined is incommensurate to the universe. In other words, the universe is like totally below its level. Right? The universe and everything that comes from it in all the spiritual worlds is almost incidental. Right? It's like okay, Einstein taught an elementary school class once. Okay, you wouldn't define him as an elementary school teacher, right? So that would be the metaphor. Adam Kadmon happens to contain within it the vision for all of the universe and everything that comes after. But in its self-definition, this is almost incommensurate. This is almost incidental. So you can get an idea of the loftiness of the thing we're describing. The fact that everything comes from it is totally incidental, right? Its true definition is that it comes from the kav. It comes from this ray of godliness. You cannot even call it, in its inner level, in its self-relationship, a general light that includes all of creation within it. Because there's a rule that the general category is like the particulars. The particulars and the general are similar. The particulars do not contain within them except what is in the category. Let's do footnote 48. It's a good footnote. The Tzemach Tzedek is borrowing terminology from the 13 principles of biblical exegesis outlined by Rabbi Yishmael in the Sifra, which we recite every day before morning prayers. Right? The 13 rules of learning out from the Torah. Right? One of them is that, riffing on that, the Tzemach Tzedek is saying that what is in the general principle is there is nothing in the particular that is not in the general. In other words, the whole idea of the general, right? The whole idea of general and particular, right? Which is a very easy form of I don't know what the term is, of relationship, maybe causality, even depending how you look at it. It's a very simple one to understand, right? You have the group and you have the individual, right? And there is an aspect, perhaps, of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, perhaps, right? But generally speaking, right, if you have a group and you take all the individuals and you put them together, you now have everything that's in the group. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek is saying. So he's saying that the fact is that everything that's in the universe and in the physical universe and all the spiritual worlds comes from Adam Kadmon, right, in a way of Prat and Klal, in a way that Adam Kadmon, that we said, is the general vision, and then everything that comes after is only a particular aspect, or a particular part of it. What the Tzemach Tzedek is saying is that basically that means that if you add up all the particulars, you should be able to get the whole. What the Tzemach Tzedek is saying is that at essence, Adam Kadmon is completely beyond what you get when you add all the particulars together. In other words, that's only the external. That's what comes from Adam Kadmon. But Adam Kadmon itself, this level, is at a level of infinitude that's beyond any of this relationship, and that's the proof that it's beyond the relationship. Because if it were defined by being the source for all these things, then if you added everything together, you would be able to get Adam Kadmon. And that's not the case, right? The case is that Adam Kadmon is much greater than this. Than everything that comes after. The Ein Sof Baruch Hu, and here's the point. Here's why we're saying all of this. Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light, may it be blessed. Lav mikol inayin midos iu klal, is not of any of these attributes at all. V'lechein b'chinas haratzoin hazeh shekos v'ramak hu be'emes netzal gam kein l'achar hatzimtzum. Therefore, this desire, which the Ramak writes about, is in truth emanated after the Tzimtzum, of the Maila B'Shem HaArizal, as is written above in the name of the Arizal. So, what Tzemach Tzedek is saying is that do not mistake, the Adam Kadmon receives from the Kav, but it has an expression in all the particulars of the spiritual and physical universes, the physical and spiritual worlds. You cannot mistake that for Ein Sof, for God's truly infinite expression. God's truly infinite expression is far and away above and beyond any relationship with the universe is spiritual and the universe physical, and therefore Adam Kadmon is not the infinite light of God. In other words, the Tzemach Tzedek is saying we side with the Arizal and not with the Ramak. The Arizal says that this vision that God has of all of the creation is after the Tzimtzum in the world of Adam Kadmon, in the world of Akudim. The Ramak, if you recall from last week and the week before, the Ramak says that this is part of God himself. This is God's vision before the creation of anything, or the emanation of anything, it would appear. And we are saying, no, the Arizal has it correctly, the Tzemach Tzedek is saying. It's not part of God himself, it's an expression after the Tzimtzum. Because God does not contain within him all of the universe, even as an external aspect. God's infinite light does not contain within it all of the universe and everything that will take place. Right? In other words, here's a different way of saying it. Even though Adam Kadmon is a single desire, a single vision, and nothing in there is differentiated, it's really all one. So in a sense, it's above everything that comes after it. Nevertheless, these things do come from it. And everything is actually included within Adam Kadmon. And you cannot say, God forbid, that everything is actually included within Ein Sof. Ein Sof does not include or contain anything. Ein Sof is simply the expression of everything that God is. There is nothing in it. There is nothing included within it before the Tzimtzum we're talking about. There's no room for anything to exist. There's no room for the potential of anything to exist there. Therefore, Adam Kadmon is not the expression of everything that God is, but rather it's a ray of his light after the Tzimtzum. That's the whole point that Tzedek is making here. Okay. On to the discussion about the Torah. V'zeh shekasav hazayar. May I borrow someone's watch? Actually, this will work just fine. Thank you. V'zeh shekasav hazayar. I am 4 lines up on 353. 4 lines up on 353. V'zeh shekasav hazayar. This is what the Zayar says. Kudshabrichu istakel be'oraisa ubara alma. That God looked in the Torah and created the world. What does this mean? Istakel davka, specifically he looked. Shubechinas einayim da'ak. In other words, he doesn't hear the Torah, he doesn't smell the Torah or taste the Torah, he looks in the Torah specifically, referring to the eyes of Adam Kadmon. We have another part of Adam Kadmon, spiritual or metaphysical biology. Right? We have the eyes of Adam Kadmon. Which come from the external dimension of the vessels of Adam Kadmon, Shenikra or Klali, which is called the general light. So the eyes also represent an external aspect of Adam Kadmon. I don't know what the difference is, particularly between the eyes and the nose and the nose and the ears and the mouth. Right? Nose, ears, and mouth are all together, and the eyes are separate, mentioned separately. Obviously referring to a different aspect. I'm not sure what the difference is. We're saying here it's also an external aspect of Adam Kadmon, of Akudim, V'sham hu sheresh haTorah. This is the root of the Torah. This is where the Torah comes from, which is a very dramatic thing to say in general. This is the root of the Torah. This is where the Torah comes from. Shenikra mashal hakadmoni. The Torah is referred to in the Gemara as the mashal hakadmoni, the primordial or the primeval analogy. That's what the Torah is called. The Torah is called the analogy that has always been there, or the mashal that has always existed. A mashal is a Hebrew for a parable or an analogy. The Torah is referred to as the primordial analogy, the analogy from the beginning. All right, what does this mean? I'm 2 lines up on 352, because it is from the external dimensions of Chachma and Bina of Adam Kadmon, which Chachma is connected to the eyes, by the way. I'm not sure if those two things are related. Fine. It's just saying where it's from. As the sages say, the Nevles Chachma, it translates the aftergrowth, okay? Like the we'll stick with his definition, it's fine. The aftergrowth of Chachma, which is above, the aftergrowth of the sublime wisdom is the Torah. What does this mean? What does all this mean? Okay, so Tzedek's going to explain. Top of page 355. Hine ba v'al yada ha'or en seif mahave ha'elam. That it is through the Torah that Or Ein Sof, that God's infinite light creates the world. She'al yedei haklal nimshach achar kach haprat. That through the general principle is the specific afterward, is the specific drawn forth afterward. From the general principle, according to the general principle, is the particular afterwards drawn out. What are we saying? We're saying that Adam Kadmon, the world of Akudim, which we've been describing as this singular vision of God's desire, this singular vision of God's desire for all of the universes and for all of the spiritual worlds and physical worlds. This desire is the root of Torah. Torah is found there as well. We're not just talking about worlds, we're talking about Torah, we're talking about the divine wisdom, or which is totally united with God. God looks at the general. Now, the Torah is referred to as the primordial analogy, the primordial metaphor. Why? Because the Torah is the means by which the single vision of Adam Kadmon is unfolded at every level of the creation, each thing in its correct place. God looks at the general principle and he creates the specific. In other words, the Torah, the notion of Torah that we're describing, is the single desire and the single vision that God has for all of the creation. Is when we say that God looks in the Torah and creates the world. And he takes this general principle and he differentiates it, right? He takes all the different parts and moves them out to their place. I said last week like a centrifuge is how I picture it, right? He takes this undifferentiated, this single, obviously centrifuge is a very physical metaphor, and etc. Don't look too deeply. But the God takes this one vision for all of the creation, for all of time, everything that was, is, and will be physical and spiritual, and everything is brought to its place. The world of Atzilus is in its place, the world of Bria, the world of Yetzirah, the world of Asiya, the physical world with its time and its order and its space, everything in its right time and everything in its right place. Everything is according to the measurement of the divine wisdom. Everything is according to Torah. So Torah is really the primordial metaphor, right? The mashal hakadmonium, because everything, there is one essential truth, and the truth, God's desire is not that the one truth simply be given over. God's desire is that it come down in metaphors and ranks upon ranks of metaphors, right? So God takes the one single truth and he differentiates it into 10 spheres, right? Into 10 different expressions. And from those 10 different expressions, he creates the multiplicity of creation. And everything is just a metaphor leading back to the one desire, the one essential and united desire, which is the root of Torah, which is in the world of Adam Kadmon, which is in the world of Akudim.
So Adam Kadmon and Torah sounds the same.
No, not exactly. We're saying that the root, here's what we specifically said. We said the root of Torah is in the external aspect of Adam Kadmon, which is what we're describing as God's will for all of creation. That's what we're saying specifically. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's what we say. So God's desire that everything, for everything, everything exists there, and God looks into the general expression, the way that everything is as it's totally united in the single desire, and then he creates it in a particular way, as the Tzemach Tzedek will go on to explain. The love de oraisa bara alma. I'm on the third line of 355. It is not that Torah itself created the world. It is not that the general thought,
the actual thought.
Yeah, what we've been describing as the general thought, general and actual. It's not that this thought, this one vision of the world, actually creates the world. God forbid. In other words, because that really would be like idol worship, right? That God steps aside and Ak just unfolds, right? That's what you would imagine, right? So the idol worshiper would immediately seize on this notion of Adam Kadmon, right? Of this single vision of reality, and he would start to get mechanistic, because idol worshippers, especially today, love mechanisms, right? And what they would say is that you have this initial vision of the world which has everything in it. So God creates the vision, he steps aside, and everything just sort of unfolds, right? Like clockwork. Everything just sort of reaches to its own reality. We're saying, God forbid to say that. That would be the Torah creates the world, which is not what we're saying. Correct, yes, deist. Like Emerson and Thoreau. We're not saying that Torah, that would be equivalent of saying that Torah creates the world. That's not what we're saying. We're saying God looks in the world. God looks in the world, in the Torah, and creates the world. Elasha ein sof berei hapratim al yedei hamachshava ha'klolos. Ein sof, God's infinite expression, God Himself expressed, creates the particulars of creation through this general vision, through this general thought. Ba'araisa ksiv vayhi'ar, in the Torah it is written, "Let there be light." Hainu mitzias ha'er shehaya kolul b'machshava klolos. Meaning. He's parsing the Zohar line by line. It may be harder to tell in the English, right? So he's saying the Zohar. What does the Zohar says? The Zohar says it's written in the Torah, "Let there be light." God reads, "Let there be light" in the Torah, and He says it, and then there's light. What does this mean as we've been describing it? So it says, "Let there be light" is written in the Torah. What does it mean it's written in the Torah before God says it? Before God creates it? We mean, not that it, God forbid, doesn't come from God. We mean that it's "Let there be light" is written in the Torah means that there is something that will eventually be a particular creation called light included within that unified vision of Ak. Within the world of Akudim, which remember, there's no division there. It's only one thing. It's really only one Nakuda. It's one point. There's only one desire there. Within that one desire, right, it's like saying, I have only one desire to go to the ballpark, to the baseball game, right? And God is looking, and He sees that within all of this, there's a desire to press the brake pedal when you arrive in the parking spot, right? So God looks within this general desire, and He takes that particular creation and He creates it particularly. He takes it out of the general creation And he creates it in a particular way, which is obviously through a process. There's the spheres and the whole thing as we've been describing it. But that's what it means God looks in the Torah and he creates the world. It's written in the Torah, let there be light. In other words, there is something called light included in his general vision. God has one desire. In order to accomplish this one desire, I need something called light. So I look where I have written light in the Torah, which means I look within this one desire where virtually this thing called light already exists. And I take it and I create it particularly. Yes, this is what it means. God looks in the Torah and he creates the world. Hainu. Yeah.
So when we say light,
yeah.
do we mean...
When we're talking about the 6 days of creation and let there be light, right? It would be easier if we just said like the fish in the sea, right? Then it would be clear. But to be particular, no, not necessarily is the light on the first day of creation necessarily a physical light. Right? You have a whole problem. Where did the light come from? There was no sun and no moon until the fourth day, and the whole thing, right? So the third, is it the third or the fourth? I should probably know that. I think the third. The third is the sun and the moon, if I'm not mistaken. So
light has to be some form of awareness or reality.
Well, the commentary on the Torah on the first day of creation says that the light is the light of Mashiach that was hidden away for the tzaddikim one day. I don't know what that means. I still don't know what that is. It would seem to be not physical. You're right. It would seem to be something like enlightenment. But the same point would work for, God said, let there be fish in the sea. It would be the same thing, right? It says in the Torah, let there be fish in the sea. Right? Well, or you had the sea already, but let there be fish in the sea, right? So God has this single desire, right, which is for the entire universe, physical, spiritual, everything that was, is, and will be, everything all together. He has a single desire with no parts. He looks in the Torah, which means he observes this desire he has, right, and he creates, let there be fish in the sea. He takes them as they are virtually in this single vision, and he creates the particular creation when he creates the world. The truth is, as I said before, the 10 utterances of creation, as recorded in the book of Genesis, correspond Kabbalistically to the 10 spheres. In other words, it's not just the fish in the sea. The fish in the sea, the utterance to create the fish in the sea, comes from a certain sphere. There's a certain spiritual derivation of it. So we're talking both about physical things and about spiritual things from which they derive. So it's not, in other words, it's not contradictory. I'm not saying he just creates the fish in the sea without the process that we described at the beginning of this class. There is the process, and the process itself leads to the fish in the sea. So there's Akudim, Nakudim, Vrudim, the 4 spiritual worlds, and eventually you have something called the physical fish in the sea, and this is what's referred to in the written Torah as the fish in the sea. And the whole point is that if you know Kabbalah, and you know the oral law, and the inner secrets of Torah, when you read, and God created the fish in the sea, you understand that this is true at a literal level as well, but also refers to all of the other levels, which is why the Torah is called the primordial metaphor. Right? There's something essentially metaphorical about Torah, which means not in the sense of when people say Torah is metaphorical, like the modern way of saying Torah is metaphorical, which is a way of saying it's not true. Right? It's basically right. The Torah is a nice book of wisdom. Right? It's like saying Lahavdil, the Odyssey is also it's allegorical. So okay, so we can learn something nice for our life, but it's nothing in it is true. The Odyssey never happened. Which, by the way, I think latter day they have discovered that maybe some of the things in the Odyssey did happen. It's a separate story. They used to think the Trojan War was made up too, and now they think that it isn't, right? Anyway, I was distracted. So the primordial metaphor, when we say the Torah is fundamentally a metaphor, this is what we mean, what we're discussing here. Because the Torah is at its roots, at its source, the essence of Torah is this single vision that God has for creation, for all of the emanated worlds, the physical worlds, the spiritual worlds. And the Torah is where God takes the individual vision and differentiates it and creates the actual specific creation from it. So the Torah, when we read the actual Torah, the words of the Chumash, the words of the Chumash contain within them this fundamental vision. This is God's wisdom, not God's wisdom as it exists merely within the creation. This is God's wisdom in the process of the creation of everything. The Torah is the root. The Torah in its root is the vision of everything that will be, as one unified wisdom of God, one unified vision. That's what the Torah is in its root.
It's like the stem cell of the universe.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, sure. Yeah.
And just to make sure. So when God reads or looks into the Torah,
Yeah.
the Torah and God really have to exist at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
And some point,
Right.
we don't know when
Yeah.
or how,
Yeah.
and maybe it doesn't even make sense to think of it this way.
Mm.
To say that God looked into the Torah, it wasn't that there was a moment in time when he looked
No,
into the Torah.
correct.
It was that
We're describing a process of creation. The process is not a process in time, though. It's a process of causality, right? This must precede this, not in time, but causally, right? Even if they're happening at the same time, this must precede this, right? It's like saying that it's something like, I hesitate to use this metaphor, it's probably a very bad metaphor, but it's something like saying that if you see a person walking around, they must have a father. Right? Even if their father's not here now, even if their father's passed away, right? The son causally demands that there's a father, right? The son inherently, by being the son, demands that there's a father. So that's actually that's the sort of thing we're describing. When we say God looked in the Torah to create the world, we mean that in the process of the world's creation, the world comes from the Torah in this specific way, that the Torah is the unified vision of everything. It's the initial emanation, is the source of Torah, and in this initial emanation, everything is included. And God looking in the Torah and then seeing what it says and creating the world from it is the process whereby everything is then differentiated into the 10 spheres and goes on to create the world of multiplicity. That's basically what we're saying. Yeah.
that the Torah is somehow supersedes God.
Why?
Because to know what's in the Torah, to have to look into the Torah,
Right.
means that there's a separation.
That was our initial question. The initial question was, why would God need to look into the Torah? What we're saying here is specifically that it's not that God needs to look in the Torah. We're saying that the Torah is the means by which this process takes place. It's not that the Torah creates the world. God forbid. If we were to say the Torah creates the world, that the Torah had any of this causative property inherently, rather than from God, right? And if it had any power of its own to create the world, that would, God forbid, be idol worship. We're actually saying the opposite. And the thing is that, and I explained this last week with the story with the Buddhist with the idol, and he threw it on the ground, right? I told that one week here. That as you go higher up and you appreciate the higher and the holier things that we believe in Judaism, which is a very strict monotheism, you have to be able to balance these two things, right? The Torah is unbelievably holy. Right? It's unbelievably unified with God. And yet, what makes it so holy and what makes it so great is specifically the fact that it has so little separation from Him. Right? The Torah, it's the very fact that the Torah has no power of its own, and yet through it, everything that we know comes, that is with the definition of holiness. Right? The Torah is holy. What do we mean by holy in Judaism? We mean that it's a vessel for God. We mean that the Torah points to God in every aspect of it. Right? The Torah has this immense power in the way we're describing, right? Everything that exists, everything in the physical universe, all the spiritual realities, basically everything we know, more or less, except from what the Torah tells us, right? The Torah itself tells us. Everything that we know comes from the Torah and comes through the Torah. And yet, the Torah is not a separate entity of its own at all. The Torah is merely a vessel. The Torah is merely the means by which God creates the universe. That's what it means something is holy. Something is holy means it's incredibly high and close to God, but not close in the way that it competes. Not close in the way that it itself thinks it's God. Close in the way that it is totally bottled and subsumed and abnegated to God. That is the definition of holiness in Judaism. So that's what we're saying about the Torah. We're saying that it's a very high thing. Really, this is important to understand in trying to understand what we mean when we say something is a higher level or a lower level, right? It needs a bit of texture. It's a little bit complicated. When we say it's higher, what does that mean? We mean it's closer to God. There's different ways to be closer to God, though, right? You could be closer to God in that you are more like God, Or you could be closer to God in that you are more of a vessel for God. Right? One is holy and one is unholy. Right? This is why you have very interesting Maimarim, which talk about how Tehu, the world where nothing could withstand the patience of anything else, the world of chaos, Nakudim, right, is higher than Tikkun. Right? It would seem. Right? Tehu is a higher level than Tikkun. But Tehu, chaos, is the opposite of everything holy. It's the opposite of everything the Torah tells us to do, right? Basically, it's described in Chassidus how every avera and every bad thing and all the temptations of the world and all of the things which keep you from studying Torah, it all has its root in Tehu, right? Tehu is the problem of so many, is the root of so many problems, is the world of Tehu. And yet, it's higher than the world of Tikkun, right? So the question becomes, what does higher and lower mean? So there's different aspects to it, right? In a way, Tehu is much closer to God than Tikkun, because Tehu is a much clearer expression, right? And we feel this frustration inherently all the time. It's the frustration that comes with reason. Tikkun is associated with reason and order. Atzilus is the world, essentially is the ordered world, right? So the frustration with order is that why can't it just be simple, right? Why can't I just either why can't I either retreat as a hermit from the world or be totally given over to the world? What's this balancing act where you have to give tzedakah and you should give a lot, but not more than 1/5, but maybe more than 1/5? Right, as it says in the Tanya, it's like cut me a break, right? Why can't it just be all chesed? I'll be all chesed, right? Tehu, chesed de tehu, the chesed of chaos is I'm all chesed, 100% chesed. There's no room for anything else. I completely given over. I don't have any possessions of my own, right? I'm completely given over to other people, whether they deserve it, whether they don't deserve it. I walk around, I hand $100 bills to everyone until I have no money left, right? I give away my clothes and I go live in the woods, right? And I do kindness to the animals, or whatever, right? That's kindness, 100% given away, right? That's kindness of Tehu. Now, in a sense, right, here's the thing. You have to be a chacham, right? Some people look at the kindness of Tehu and they say, that's authentic kindness, right? What's with the businessman? He gives $100,000 when he has $20 million and he gets a plaque in the shul and we're supposed to respect him, right? That's not kindness. The kindness is the guy. He gave away all of his possessions. He gave away everything, right? The chachma is, the Yiddish seichel is that we realize that although the kindness of Tehu has a certain authenticity and a certain reality to it that's pure and it's uncorrupted by seichel. In a sense, seichel is corrupting because the whole point of seichel is that everything is qualified. My kindness is defined in terms of 30 other things. I can't just be kind. I have to be kind while also being this, while also being this, while also being this. And there's 10 spheres, and everything has to be balanced and ordered and arranged correctly. Right? That's tikkun. That's the world of Atzilus. That's the world of Torah. That's the way we're supposed to be. Everything is supposed to be balanced and correct, and everything in its right place. Right? The world of Tehu seems so much more authentic sometimes. Right? The whole message is that don't be fooled. Don't think that just because it's higher, just because it appears more godly, it has that pure, it has that energy to it, which is in a sense a godly energy. It's because it's pure, it comes from God. It's this pure thing. Don't be fooled and think that that's the greater thing. God wants the tikkun. He wants the qualified thing, even though it's lower. Right? That's my rant. So it's a whole, we got in a very big diversion. The bottom line, we started this discussion talking about how higher and lower is complicated in Chassidus. You have to have, there's a certain chachma. It's not everything's, when you say higher and lower, every word has a definition. You have to ask, what are we talking about? When you say it's higher, what do we mean? So anyway, just let me summarize, we're over time, but let me summarize very briefly what we've said in today's class. We've basically said, we didn't cover a lot of ground inside, we've basically said that this level of akudim is also referred to as the root of Torah. Not akudim itself, because akudim itself is just straight from the Kav, right, which we also said today. But this aspect of akudim, this aspect of Adam Kadmon, which is the vision of all the world at once, this one vision for all of the creation, this vision is the root of Torah. And when we say that God looks in the Torah and creates the world, we mean He looks at how the thing is as part of this one single vision, which includes everything. And then He actually goes and He differentiates it out into its own time and place, whether time and place physically, time and place spiritually. He gives it its definition and its place and its actual, so to speak, reality, its metzias, right? Its being. He gives it its being as it is unto itself. Right? He takes it as it is in its source, and he gives it its individual being.
License to exist.
Something like that, yeah. So when we read the Torah that we read, we must understand that although it may be in words, and the words may seem to be speaking about limited realities, really there's more going on here. This is part of what we mean when we say the Torah is infinite, by the way. When we say the Torah is infinite, this is part of what we mean. That everything that is has its root and comes from the Torah. And the Torah is the blueprint for all of reality, because at essence, if you know how to work the mashal hakadmoni, the primordial metaphor, you can work your way up past all of the particulars and all of the things that the Torah seems to be speaking about at the surface level, and you could reach this profound and unified reality, which is the root of Torah in the world of akudim. Tonight's class.